Welcome back to Philadelphia Airport. A few years have passed since our last visit and much has changed. From terminal refurbishments, new constructions, airline moves and a whole lot of trouble on the ground. PHL isn't for the faint-hearted, as we will find out over the coming months. An airport is never finished, and while the airport has changed a lot, some things also remain as they have been. Terminal 1 is one of those areas that still portray the original PHL charm. Many of the North American legacy as well as low-cost carriers are operating out of the T1A pier, with one of the biggest players being Frontier Airlines, that by now has well established itself at the airport. And so we find an Airbus A321neo of said airline in the gate. The aircraft that arrived not that long ago from San Juan and right now is unloading some luggage will soon be prepared for its next stint, bringing the aircraft to Denver. An on-time departure seems rather likely. Of course, a major focus of all airlines, but especially of those low-cost airlines. And so it is also good news at the next gate, where we find an Airbus A320neo of Frontier Airlines that is pushing ahead of time. The aircraft that earlier today arrived from Tampa, Florida, will now be heading to one of those major East Coast cities, namely Boston. If only an on-time push, let alone departure, was in the cards for the 737-800 of Canadian airline WestJet. But that does not seem to be the case, as the aircraft is still loading some last pieces of luggage, with a departure time for Calgary already 5 minutes ago, so passengers will have to be a little bit patient in this case. Something the United Airlines passengers on board this Airbus A320 of the airline know all too well, as despite an on-time arrival from Chicago did not lead to an on-time departure for Chicago. But the aircraft has been pushed and is now getting ready to go, so the delay on today's flight will at least remain within reason. With 14 minutes to run, the 737-700 of Southwest Airlines does still have a little bit of time for an on-time departure. The aircraft is being boarded and last luggage is being loaded. It will get tight, but an on-time departure for Denver is absolutely possible for the aircraft that earlier today arrived from Houston. So while there hasn't been any wildly out of proportion disruptions to traffic so far, small delays remain delays and they cost airlines a lot of money. A general shortage of staff at the airport is one thing, but even ground equipment is getting scarce. New and more equipment is being ordered, but firstly doesn't arrive overnight, and secondly, rightly pointed out by union leaders, does not lead to more hands handling the equipment. But let's see how this situation is over at T1 Pier B, the American Airlines and One World terminal. Thanks to the early arrival of the 737 MAX 8 of American Airlines coming in from Baltimore, the ground staff has plenty of time to prepare the aircraft for its next departure, which will bring the aircraft to Austin. Right now, some last luggage is being offloaded, while catering already is preparing the aircraft for its next stint. Running behind schedule is this Airbus A319 of American Airlines that arrived about an hour ago from Jacksonville. Due to some no-shows, some luggage had to be offloaded, which has delayed proceedings here at the aircraft, which however should be getting on its way within the next 15 minutes. After a lengthy flight all the way from the US West Coast, specifically from Los Angeles, LAX, the Airbus A321neo of American Airlines arrived around 50 minutes ago here at Philadelphia and is now slowly being prepared for its next stint, which will bring the aircraft to Dallas-Fort Worth. At the far end of the B Concourse, we find this little American Eagle Embraer ERJ-175 that arrived from Kansas City about 20 minutes ago. This aircraft will be leaving shortly before 9 in the evening to New York LaGuardia. Over on the other side of the concourse, we find a new arrival here at Philadelphia Airport. Royal Jordanian has started a direct route to the US from the Jordanian capital Amman. As the aircraft arrived earlier this afternoon, the aircraft has spent some time on a remote stand in order to free up space at the terminal, but has by now been pulled back to the terminal as preparations for the return flight to Amman are about to begin. An aircraft that should be much further in its preparations is this Boeing 787-9 of American Airlines. The aircraft arrived earlier today from Dallas-Fort Worth and is now being prepared for a flight to Paris-Charles de Gaulle. However, things have not quite gone as planned. The aircraft is still being refueled, which means boarding has not yet started, and so the delayed procedures on ground will make an on-time departure next to impossible. Luckily, a delay is not on the horizon for the CRJ-900 of American Eagle. The aircraft arrived about 20 minutes ago from Knoxville and will now be prepared for a flight out to Norfolk. Right now, the cabin is being cleaned and then boarding will be starting fairly soon. The C Concourse of Terminal 1 has seen its share of change in the industry and has served a wide range of airlines over the years. From MD-11s, A340s and even the mighty A380, this part of Terminal 1 had particularly been needing a makeover. With American Airlines expanding its operations at PHL and therefore needing more floor space, the decision was made to refurbish PSC and, with the conclusion of this project, to hand over daily operations to American Airlines. Despite an on-time arrival from Denver, the 737-800 of American Airlines has missed its scheduled departure slot to Nashville, which was set at 25 minutes past 7 in the evening. This is mainly due to ground staff shortages, which meant equipment arrived late at the aircraft. Luckily, by now, the last pieces of luggage have been loaded, meaning the aircraft is just about ready to go. However, the cockpit is still waiting for a new slot time for the flight down to Nashville, Tennessee. And yet another aircraft has been affected by the ground staff shortage, in this case this 777-300ER of American Airlines. The aircraft came in the afternoon from Paris-Charles de Gaulle and was now supposed to leave for London Heathrow about 2 minutes ago. However, catering is still being loaded as well as some last cargo. Worse yet, if the aircraft is not leaving within the next hour, some of the crew might reach its max flight time, which means the aircraft could end up being cancelled altogether. Luckily, things are going much better here over at this Airbus A350-900 of Iberia that has arrived earlier this evening from Madrid and still has just over an hour until it will go on its return flight back to the Spanish capital. The aircraft is right now being refueled and cargo is being loaded. Boarding should start within the next 20 minutes. Over at the Airport Hotel Bongo Inn, well known for hosting a wide array of conferences, we also today find clients that have gathered for an event. Today's big conference, hosted by the Pennsylvania Screenwriters Guild, focuses on writers with writer's block. Rumors have it that the first assignment has been for participants to write down their ideas on how to unblock a writer's block. Over at the the remote stands of Terminal 1 we find a Avianca Dreamliner, a 787-8 to be specific. The aircraft that arrived 5 minutes to 2 in the afternoon from Bogota is right now resting here at this remote stand in order to free up some space over at the terminals. The aircraft is scheduled for a return flight to Bogota at 5 minutes to midnight. Another aircraft that can be found over here at these remote stands is a 737 MAX 8 of Cayman Airways. The aircraft that arrived here at about 7:30 in the evening will be returning in around 25 minutes to Georgetown. Right now, catering is at the aircraft that soon will be taking on passengers. An aircraft that just received its clearance to line up for its takeoff is the 787-8 of American Airlines. The aircraft came in earlier from Naples and will now, with about 20 minutes delay, head for Amsterdam. 20 minutes on a long-haul flight is, however, next to nothing and can easily be caught up during flight. Next up in line for takeoff is this MD-11F of FedEx that today is flying on the Memphis-Philadelphia-Memphis rotation and even has arrived here at the threshold a few minutes ahead of time, making this aircraft one of the few exceptions today. Behind the FedEx we find an Embraer ERJ-175 of American Eagle that will be leaving for Columbus with 45 minutes delay, and that despite an on-time arrival from Louisville. One more aircraft caught by the staff shortage here at Philadelphia Airport. After this 777-200ER of American Airlines arrived earlier this afternoon from Rome Fiumicino, the aircraft has now been prepared for a new flight overseas. In this case, the aircraft will be going to Zurich in Switzerland with about 20 minutes delay, but also in this case, due to the long flight time, 20 minutes can easily be caught up during the flight. Currently number 4 in line for departure is this Airbus A220-300 of Air Canada that today is flying on the Toronto rotation. The aircraft will be leaving Philadelphia with a few minutes delay due to the heavy traffic at the moment, but also here this should not have a big impact on the arrival time of the aircraft in Canada. And then 5th in line for departure is the CRJ-900 of American Eagle that came in from Savannah earlier this evening. However, the wait will of course add on to the already about half an hour long delay of this flight that is about to leave for Manchester. The airport is truly in a transition phase, with a lot of time, money and effort being spent on improving the airport's infrastructure. But while reopening of terminals and airline expansions lean towards the more glamorous part of the business, underneath the surface conflicts are brewing. Personnel shortages have plagued the industry since the end of the pandemic, and PHL Airport is facing this issue too. Opening back up Terminal 2 and soon Terminal 3 does not help calm down this situation. And yet, the reopening of Terminal 2 after years of extensive refurbishments is a big milestone for the airport in its efforts of improving the overall experience of passengers and airlines alike. And with the takeover of Terminal 1 Sea Concourse by American Airlines, many European and Middle Eastern airlines have moved operations over to the newly opened Terminal 2. Over at Terminal 2 we do find this Airbus A380-800 of Emirates that will be a regular guest here at Terminal 2 and will be profiting from the new and improved infrastructures of the terminal, which can host up to 4 Airbus A380s at the same time, with specifically designed gate areas for the A380, which means up to 3 jet bridge fingers at one gate, optimizing turnaround times and proceedings in general. Enjoying the improved facilities is also something Turkish Airlines will see its fair share of. On today's flight from Istanbul, the airline has sent over this 777-300ER in a very elaborate livery. However, the improved infrastructure and the spectacular livery cannot cover up the fact that the aircraft is by now delayed. The aircraft is still loading cargo and even taking on fuel, which means boarding hasn't even started yet. And with an ever-increasing delay, the chances of the aircraft catching up on this during flight is becoming less and less likely. Technically not yet delayed is the 767-300ER of Iceland Air that will be leaving for Reykjavik. However, with only 20 minutes left on its schedule and still taking on both cargo and catering and not even having started boarding yet, the airline is forced to push back the departure at least 30 minutes, an unfortunate fact that very soon will be conveyed to passengers. Luckily, there are also examples of things going right. In this case, for this Boeing 777-200ER of Austrian Airlines, the aircraft is right now in the middle of its turnaround and is now being prepared for its return flight to Vienna, the capital of Austria. Austrian Airlines is just one of the Lufthansa Group airlines that has moved operations over to Terminal 2. Also Lufthansa mainline and of course Swiss International Airlines will be operating out of this terminal in the future, and Brussels Airlines is rumored to start operations from next year. An airline that is operating out of Terminal 2 as well, but only on temporary basis, is KLM, as the airline, as many of its SkyTeam partners, will be moving to Terminal 3 once that terminal has been completed. For now, the Amsterdam flight is operating out of the Terminal 2 area, and things are going fairly well. It looks like the aircraft will be leaving on time. What a relief. As for Terminal 3, expectations are high, as the airport management has called it the airport's future crown jewel in modern airport design and operations. To ensure this, the airport is currently conducting trial runs in order to ensure that all signage within the terminal is being understood correctly by travelers and to find any possible hiccups prior to the opening of the terminal. Apart from many SkyTeam airlines that will be moving operations to this part of the airport, also a fair share of South American traffic is expected to be handled from the latest addition to the airport. And while we are yet to find any actual aircraft at Terminal 3 over at the remote stands of the terminal, there are a few to be found, like the 767-300F of LATAM Cargo that came in at 6:45 in the evening from Brussels in Europe, and at around midnight will be heading onwards to Lima with more cargo loaded. And earlier this morning, a very special flight arrived here at the airport in form of the 747 SP of Saudia, or specifically the Royal Flight Division of Saudia. The aircraft is scheduled for a departure in about 20 minutes. However, with these special VIP flights, flight plans are often changed last minute. And while there is some movement around the aircraft at the moment, it is unlikely that the aircraft will be leaving at the currently scheduled time. And with that, we have reached the end of today's airport tour. Hopefully, the airport will succeed in improving proceedings on the ground in the future, as the current situation doesn't just put a strain on its relations with passengers, but in an increasing way also with airlines.